The Census of Ag showed farmers in Texas planted more than 900,000 acres of cover crops in 2012, the most by any state in the nation. But the highest concentration of cover crops on cropland was largely in the southern and eastern U.S. We've told you before how University of Nebraska-Lincoln researchers are trying to learn more about the potential benefits or impacts of cover crops to corn and soybean production systems. The studies are taking place in Concord in northeast Nebraska, Meade in east central Nebraska, Clay Center in the south central area of the state, and Brule in the western one-third. Nebraska Extension agronomist Roger Elmore has been part of the team looking at different aspects of using cover crops. He joined us recently to give us an update on the short-term outcomes and discuss the background of the research.
When I first came here in 2014 January, the Corn and Soybean Board had sponsored and supported a project on cover crops. So that was on our plate right away, and we were looking at how do you incorporate cover crops into corn and soybean systems in Nebraska, both irrigated and dryland, without impacting the yield of corn or soybeans.
Initially, what did you start to see about results from yield based on using cover crops?
Well, it's still early.
Yeah.
But number one, establishing a cover crop into a standing crop of corn or soybeans is a tough go. I mean, you've got a very competitive environment there. We've bred corn and soybeans to be very competitive and to yield well. So it's a very tough environment that you're seeding cover crops into if you go in late August or early September, which is typical when you're aerial seeding or something like that. That's a typical time. Seeding it after harvest is easier. We're no-till in all our operations in this experiment, but we are also, so we can drill it in and get a good stand. But the problem is there, you've shortened your growing season immensely. So in soybeans, we're talking about seeding in October, and in corn, probably maybe late October, maybe sometimes even early November. There's just not a lot of time for growth in the fall.
Have you noticed yield responses?
Occasionally. We've got 4 locations at each site. We've got corn following corn, corn following soybeans, and soybeans following corn. So at 2 or 3 of those sites, we've seen reductions in either corn or soybean yields. That's out of, what do we have, 2 years now, and 4 locations and three experiments at each location, really. So there are some yield responses that are negative. Most of them are neutral.
That's the initial
Yes.
research.
Yes.
But you've spun that off to include a variety of different things, including?
Well, we're researchers, so when you are doing experiments like this, you end up with ideas on what else needs to be done. So there's 4 or 5 spin-off experiments that we're working on. A couple of those, one deals with the impacts of changing hybrid maturity for corn or soybean maturity for soybeans. In other words, can you go in with a shorter season crop and sacrifice yield, perhaps, but that gets you into the field with cover crops earlier, so you get a little more fall growth. So we've got 2 experiments, maybe 3 or 4 going like that now at a couple locations, 1 irrigated, 1 dryland.
How challenging is it to use cover crops in a state like Nebraska?
Oh, we're quite different than the rest of the country, and a lot of the talk we hear about cover crops are eastern states where actually the cover crops serve as a way to soak up moisture and transpire it and get it out of the system to improve productivity. In our case, we're trying to preserve water and conserve water. So it's a whole different ballgame for cover crops in Nebraska.
At the Nebraska Crop Management Conference, you'll be talking about cover crops. Why might growers want to attend to learn more about this?
Well, this is a time that we can really dig into the research data and talk about it. And our job as extension people is applying that research data to Nebraska conditions. So it allows us to go more in depth than probably almost any other format for discussion we have in the state.
How challenging is it to make a recommendation on using cover crops, whether or not a grower should use cover crops in location X anywhere in Nebraska?
We're trying to get to the bottom of that, but it's almost impossible. We can talk about the options that people have. It takes fine-tuning is what it does. There's a lot of art that needs to be applied to the science here. Our job is to develop the science and help producers think through the art of application of that science to their own situation. It's not easy. It takes more management, it takes more time, it takes more money as well.
You can find more about this topic through the Crop Watch website and its dedicated cover crops page. And as we mentioned, you can learn more about this research at the Nebraska Crop Management Conference in Kearney on January 19th and 20th.